In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello and welcome to The Paddock and the Pavilion. Today we are back to the racecourse, Aintree racecourse, home to the world's most famous race. Today's guest is Sulekha Varma, the clerk of the course at Aintree racecourse, the regional head of racing for the Jockey Club in the Northwest, and the joint clerk of the course at Carlisle Racecourse. Sulekha was appointed to the roles in December 2019, but owing to the pandemic outbreak in the spring of last year, she was denied the opportunity of organising the famous race. Hopefully, she will be able to put that right in about 3 months' time. And in today's podcast, she talked about her plans for this year's race, her own racing career, her memories of the great race, and the important issue of diversity in racing. Sulekha is the right one for Aintree, and I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello, Sulekha. Welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion. A happy new year to you. I hope it's not too late for that. And how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's considering the circumstances, I'm pleased to be able to say I am well. Yeah.
Great. Well, delighted to speak to you and to have you on the show. What's it like to have one of the most important jobs in horse racing, being in control of the world's most famous race?
What's it like? It's an open question. It's a huge honour. It's unbelievably been nearly a year since I officially took up the role, and I'm actually yet to run a Grand National, which was not the year anyone had planned really. But I've been involved in the Grand National itself for the last 10 years, nearly 11 now, assisting initially when I was a trainee clerk of the course, and then once I qualified, being involved in various roles around the racecourse during the 3 days of the Grand National meeting. So I was sort of coming into a job that was fairly familiar to me. You know, it's helped hugely. I know a lot of the team. I know a lot of the people who come in and help on for the big meetings as well. So there's a lot of familiarity, but there's also been a lot to learn.
But you must have been so disappointed about the cancellation of 2020 race. Was there ever any consideration, and I never read this, about running it in the autumn?
It was talked about. It was decided that, you know, the Grand National is the Grand National, and it was felt that for a few reasons, partly to do with horses being fit enough in the autumn. Obviously it's a race that asks a lot of our equine athletes, and we go a long way to ensuring that we have horses that are capable and qualified of competing. And it was felt that if we ran it in the autumn, there was the risk that horses hadn't already had a full season just about of being in training and also racing. So that it was considered, but it was felt it wasn't appropriate for this race.
And how are plans going for 2021? Are you hopeful of crowds?
I think we're a naturally optimistic team of people, but I think there also has to be an element of realism. That, you know, we're seeing the situation in terms of COVID worsening at the moment. So I think we're all just sitting tight and seeing how things develop. We're being flexible in our planning. You know, the sincere hope is that we will run the race and the race meeting. It's what goes on in the periphery that is going to be the real challenge for us.
So tickets are actually on sale at the moment, are they, for the meeting?
I don't believe they're actually on sale, no. We've had a lot of people who transferred tickets from 2020 to 2021. So they've taken up a certain number of the ticket allocation, and also we've got a lot of hospitality booked as well. But again, everybody's just having to wait and see, much as we are.
But you had the opportunity of having those two meetings at the end of 2020 to get bedded in as such yourself in the role.
Yeah, I mean, they in some ways, for me personally, the cancellation of the Grand National was a blessing in disguise, because it meant that my very first race meeting at Aintree wasn't going to be the Grand National meeting. I've had sort of 3 fixture warm up, including in December racing over the Grand National fences, and we basically run the Beecher meeting in December as a trial practice run for the Grand National meeting itself. So we have the same people in place, the same number of doctors and vets, ground staff, and we run with the same procedures and protocols that we would in April. So it was great to get that under my belt as well.
I mean, for this year, you must have, like, they always talk about having plan B, but you must have plan C, D, E, F and G, I think.
It's exactly it, yeah. And it's an ever-moving feast, as it is, I think, for anybody, you know, whether it's horse racing or any other sport. If you're planning a major event in the current climate, you just, you know, back in December, we had nearly 2,000 people on course at Aintree to watch the racing. And a few weeks later, that wasn't happening to, you know, anywhere at all, and we're all back behind closed doors. So it just goes to show how fast things are moving, and we just have to take each day as it comes.
Yeah, well, let's hope we can get some crowds in there for this year. What's your first memory of the race yourself?
For me, it was, I must have been, I think, 9 years old, and I was in Dublin with my parents. My dad was attending a conference. He's now retired, has been retired for about 10-12 years, but he was attending a neurosurgery conference, and Mum and I went with him, because back in those days you always had a wives program, it was called. I think it certainly wouldn't be called that now, because it'd be as many probably husbands and wives program as well. But it was a sort of social side of the event, where the partners of those attending the sort of seminars and the main conference could go and do sightseeing at whatever city you were in. So Mum and I went along, and we were lucky, actually. One of the tours was to the National Stud. And at the age of 9, and I still can't remember the name of the horse, but there was this big chestnut stallion who was brought out and shown to us. And as a 9-year-old, my first question when the stallion was brought out was, can I go and pat it? And the stallion man looked at me and looked at my mum and dad and sort of thought, all right then. So I was one of the few people who actually gets to pat the stallions at the National Stud. But on that same trip, the Grand National was on that weekend, and I remember watching in the hotel room, and it was the first time I'd ever really watched racing. I'd always been into horses. Pester Power got my parents to let me learn how to ride, and I was very lucky that I was an only child, so I had these opportunities. There weren't, if I'd had brothers and sisters, it may not have been quite as easy for me, but that was, watching Minnie Homer win was my first sort of view of what the Grand National was and how exciting it was.
So you got into horses by having a pony. How old were you when you had a pony? Gosh,
I must have been probably about 9 or 10, actually. It probably would have been around that time that I got my first pony, who was a big fat hairy grey pony called Bimbo. Which is probably, again, not an appropriate name for a horse these days, but he was great for me to learn up, and he tended, a lot of the time he wouldn't go anywhere too fast, and then all of a sudden he'd decide he wanted to go somewhere fast, and I didn't have much say in the matter. But I had a lot of fun with him. He was a great pony to get started with.
Well, sure, the National Stud would be interested to know about 9-year-olds patting their stallions. And I read you went to Durham University and you studied the classics. It's not the usual route to the Clerk of the Course at Aintree.
No, when I finished school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do long term. It was, there was always the expectation I would go to university because I'd done well academically throughout my school years. So I decided to opt for a course in a subject that I enjoyed, and something that was open enough that it could lead to just about any career, and unless I'd planned to go into the maths or sciences, I was pretty safe with classics. So I had ideas that I might go into journalism. I had ideas I might go into law, do a law conversion course. I had all sorts of ideas, but then got bitten by the horse racing bug.
So how did you first get started in racing? I know you said you worked at Haydock Park as a trainee.
Yeah, that was actually quite a bit further down the line. My first exposure to racing was after I finished school. One of my school friends, her mum arranged work experience placements for a local state school, and she wanted to set one up in horse racing, but wasn't really quite sure how well it would work. So both her daughter and I were experienced riders, but her daughter couldn't drive, and this placement at Lucinda Russell's, the only accommodation she had was away from the main yard, so it needed somebody who could drive from where the accommodation was to the yard each morning. So my friend Lauren and I were sort of packed off to Lucinda Russell's for a week to test out what it was like doing work experience at a racing yard, and actually both of us were absolutely hooked. I went off to university that year. Lauren took a gap year and worked for Lucinda through part of that year as well, and then I went back and worked for Lucinda after I graduated. I became her first racing secretary. She'd never actually had a secretary before, so she'd been doing all the administration for a 50 horse yard herself, and was up till all hours in the morning doing invoicing and everything else. So wow. It was good for both of us. It was a leg up into the industry for me, and a great way to understand how a training yard works and be hands-on with the horses and all aspects of the horses as well. So I used to ride out in the morning, then I'd be sorting out farriers, vets. I used to do some race planning, used to do all the invoicing. It was a really wide-ranging role, so it was a great way for me to start.
Sounds like it. And of course another loose connection, although not at that time, with the Grand National, with Lucinda later training the winner.
Yeah, I mean, when One for Arthur won, I was up in the steward's viewing box, which is where the clerk of the course usually watches the racing from, because it gives you an eagle eye view for you to, as I refer to it, conduct the orchestra during a race. And we were all sat there, and Arthur crossed the line in front, and I had to sort of hold it in until we knew we'd got all the other horses back safe, all the jockeys were back safe, we'd located everyone. And then Andrew Tulloch just turned to me and went, "It's all right, you can scream now." So I started jumping around the steward's box, and it was fantastic, to see good friends of mine. The absolute elation that victory brings was just wonderful.
And you went on the BHA graduation scheme. Were there many other females on the course when you went on?
Yeah, I think we were probably about 50-50 at the time. I think it must have been a group of about 14 of us, and it wouldn't have been far off half and half split, male and female. And a good few of the people on the course in that year are still working in the industry, which is great.
And that led to you working at quite a few different jockey club courses as clerk of the course as well.
Yeah, so I in 2009, October 2009, I started as a trainee clerk of the course with the jockey club, and they take on a trainee clerk with not necessarily a job at the end of it. They want to train you up, and then it can take up to 2 years depending on the individual, but within a month or two of me starting, the clerk of the course at Market Raise in Nottingham decided he was moving on, so there was really a job ready for me to move into. So I had a couple of interviews with the chairman and the managing directors of the two courses at the time. They all agreed that they wanted to offer me the job. So having started training in October, by January I was already in place at Market Raise in Nottingham. Hadn't quite qualified. I didn't qualify until March, but I was basically running the racing and the race courses, but with a qualified clerk there each day, just keeping an eye on things. So it was, for me, it was rather a fast track qualification in about 6 months, as opposed to most people who would take 18 months to 2 years to get the training done.
And you've moved on. You've done Nottingham, Huntingdon, which is quite local to me, and Warwick as well.
Warwick as well, yeah.
And your last job before you started at Aintree was at Hamilton.
Yeah, so I moved up to Hamilton Park about was nearly 5 years ago now. I was there for 4 years. The opportunity came to work for an independent racecourse rather than within the jockey club, which sort of for my own personal development was a really great opportunity. You sort of move away from the I suppose the protection of a large company, where I was considered a junior member of the sort of clerk of the course racing side of the team, to being the only clerk of the course and answerable straight to the chief executive. And it was very, very different. It was a really steep learning curve, that the decisions that you make as a team are that's the decision you make for that race course and for that business. And it was a really great experience, especially, as I say, in terms of my own personal development. It was a higher level of responsibility than I'd had up to that point, and I was also therefore working at a higher level within the industry as a whole, and started representing the Scottish racecourses on various committees and organisations. So I have no doubt I wouldn't be in this role now, and I wouldn't have been ready for this role if I hadn't spent the time at Hamilton Park in between.
That sounds like a good career move for you.
It was, yeah. I think in terms of experience and broadening one's horizons, it was definitely worth it.
Now, have you encountered many barriers to your career because of your sex and being part of the BAME community?
I'm lucky to say no. I have had a very, it's not been absent from my career. Small elements of racism and sexism, but I suppose I was lucky in that my parents never brought me up to know I was any different. In hindsight, I think there was maybe, in a school of 170 pupils that I went to, there were maybe 5 or 6 who weren't white. That gradually changed, actually, as the school became more international. We had a lot of pupils came from China and the Middle East and places like that as well. So, but I was never brought up to think I was any different. I was never told that, your skin might be a problem as you grow up. We never talked about it. We never worried about it. I am what I am, and if anyone's got a problem with that, then as far as I'm concerned, it's their problem and not mine. So no, I'm pleased to say, unlike probably some of my colleagues from ethnic backgrounds or minority ethnic backgrounds, who are perhaps maybe 10, 15 years older than me, who I think did have some pretty awful experiences, I haven't had that directly to my face in the same way. Whether it goes on in the background, I don't know, and I suppose I don't really want to know. But no, I've been very lucky. I've been very well treated, and a lot of people have helped me get to where I am today.
Well, thank you for answering that. I know you're a very keen supporter of the Step on Track initiative with the BHA. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that was a fantastic pilot this year, pulled together by Sean Samara from the BHA. He is a huge racing fan and is very proud of the fact that he now works in the sport, and is very keen to ensure that people of ethnic minority backgrounds realise that racing is open and available to them, and that the wide range of opportunities there are within the sport. I think, and this actually I think goes often beyond just ethnic minority groups. I think racing as a whole perhaps needs to do even better at selling itself as a career opportunity. I think there's a lot of people working very hard in trying to reach out to schools and colleges and young people. But I do think there's a view that if you want to get into racing, you have to be a jockey, or you have to be a trainer, you have to be small and light, you have to be able to ride. When actually, those of us who are in the sport know that none of that is true. I often say, the chefs, there's some amazing chefs that work in the restaurants on our race courses, but they wouldn't be there doing that job if it wasn't for the horses and it wasn't for the racing. So while they're a chef and they're working with food and their qualifications are in food prep and food and preparing these superb dishes, actually they work in racing. And I think marketing, sales, there's so much maintenance, building maintenance, health and safety. The sites that we're running need to have safety certificates. They need to be properly maintained. And that doesn't, you can be a fan of racing, but you don't have to be able to ride a horse to do it. So I think we need to keep telling the outside world about what an amazing career you can have in racing in so many different aspects.
And it is important for the sport to have a more diverse audience as well.
Yeah, I think it's essential for the future of the sport. If people see us as a closed shop, they're not gonna come knocking on the door. We need to invite them in.
Just going back to the Grand National, I've read that you've been on the front foot with welfare issues. How do you deal with some people who claim that the race is dangerous?
I think the changes that have been made to the race over recent years have revolutionised it. They've ensured its survival. I think we've now proven that the race is safer by having run it, having raced over these new fences, some of the bits of ground that have been levelled, the slight alterations, the improvements to the irrigation system to ensure that we're racing on safe ground, on the slow side of good ground. I think all of those things have really made an enormous difference, and Aintree as a whole prides itself on leading the way on equine welfare, and we work closely with the likes of the RSPCA and particularly World Horse Welfare and other equestrian sports as well, because we're all in it because we love the horses and we all want to see them looked after and coming home safe. But equally, they're athletes and they're bred and trained to compete, and these horses love to compete. We see that every day on a racecourse. So we want to give them the safest opportunity for these athletes to prove how good they are.
Thank you. And any plans for any more meetings at Aintree? I mean, there hasn't been a flat meeting since 1976. Anything like that could happen again, or?
Unfortunately, the layout of the track in the stands would make flat racing nigh on impossible these days. The bend, sort of as they come up over the winning line and then turn back into the back straight, would just be too tight for flat racing now. It would involve knocking down stands and all sorts. So as it stands, flat racing is not an option at Aintree, I'm afraid.
And it will just remain the October, December, and the April meetings.
Yeah, we're very conscious of protecting the ground at Aintree. Those 3 days in April are so crucial that we want to ensure that we protect our surface and provide the very best racing surface that we possibly can. So we're very conscious of that. So we race in April. We also have evening meetings in May and June, on a slightly lower scale than our other meetings in terms of the quality of the racing, but they're popular in a normal year. They're popular with public coming to attend and usually enjoy a concert after racing as well. So those days are crucial to the success of the racecourse. But for us, the Grand National, it's the pinnacle, and we want to make sure we're producing the best ground we possibly can on those days in April.
Yeah, we forget sometimes that the Jockey Club is one of the biggest bookers of talent, musical talent in the country. Yeah.
In a normal year, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as we all know, the last 12 months have been a bit different. But yeah, we put on some pretty impressive acts and some fantastic shows.
Now, you've just secured a 5-year extension to the sponsorship with Randox, and you've also got the prospect of Tiger Roll going for a third successive win, albeit in 4 years. This year's race should be a cracker.
Yeah, and I think even last year's race was shaping up to be really exciting. You know, beyond Tiger Roll, there were some the potential for some great stories in there. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody would love to see Tiger Roll go for a third Grand National, and I think even without a crowd, the roof would probably be blown off if he did win a third one. Let's just hope he can bounce back from his run in the cross country at Cheltenham, and we see him back here in April.
And of course, there's an extra week gap this year because of Easter, so even better quality of horses potentially, with Cheltenham being an extra week before the race.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a very concerted effort. It goes back to the sort of welfare conversation we had earlier, that to attract a higher quality of horse to the race, and that has paid dividends to an incredible extent. So I think, yes, the 3-week gap, I think, gives an even greater opportunity to see the very best horses coming and competing.
And finally, personally, where would you like to see racing diversity-wise, say in 5 years' time?
Oh gosh, I think I would like to see more young people from ethnic backgrounds coming into the sport and staying in the sport. I think one of our greatest challenges is turnover of staff at a junior level. I think because there's a limited number of senior roles in the sport anyway, in whichever, maybe take apart sort of the training and jockey ranks, but on a administrative side, there's not a huge number of senior roles available. And I think a lot of young people from all backgrounds come into the sport, are really excited to be involved, but as they develop and as they progress, they often find that there's no opportunity for them to move onwards and upwards. So a lot of them then leave the sport, potentially go into other sports or into other industries. And I'd like to see there be more opportunity to progress, but also perhaps a drive to attract these people back again in the future. I think it's very easy to become disheartened, and I think actually the same often goes for stable staff. I think the opportunity for progression can often be difficult to see and difficult to follow, especially if you, as you get older, you're perhaps not as physically capable or as keen to be riding out every morning. As your body gets older, I think all of us feel those aches and pains a bit more. So I think career progression is something that really needs to be looked at. I think we can get people into the sport. I think the challenge is keeping them.
And personally, once the nationals out of the way, so to speak, do you ever get some spare time to do things yourself? And have you got another sport that you're passionate about?
Well, yeah, in normal times I play a lot of tennis, and this job works quite well because the main sort of tennis league season, local league season, is through the summer. So once the Grand National's done, I have the opportunity to play a few matches through the summer. But as it is, we managed a few matches with my new club through the summer this summer, but it was closed down again fairly quickly come sort of September, October, which was a real shame. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can get back on the tennis court before too long and maybe have at least a full summer of matches this year.
Well, let's hope so. Well, thank you very much for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion. I will be tuning in, like I think over 500 million other people at 5 p.m. on Saturday, April the 10th. And good luck with that, and thank you very much again for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pav.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.